Before I show my hands, I want to talk about my reads and how I adjust my play based on them really quickly so I don't bore anybody. I play the majority of my no-limit hold'em on juicy stakes, and you can just see it's very easy to get folds pre-flop. If they raise, they'll usually fold to a 3-bet. If they limp around, they'll usually fold to a raise. So, I mean, it's just amazing how few hands see flops and how easy it is to take down pots pre-flop. Drooling fish are rare, unfortunately, and I'm talking the terrible players who will put money in the pot with anything. If you see one of those, it's an opportunity to take advantage of, but they're rare. Third bullet, typically when villains are putting money in the pot, they have a hand. It's so hard to get villains to put money in the pot without a hand. So you gotta play to take down a lot of small pots and not really try to get the monster pots. Slow playing monsters is common. Basically, if you raise pre-flop and get called, bet the flop and get called, bet the turn and get called, bet the river and get raised, that's a slow played flopped set almost every time. Playing back at me, you'll see I play very loose and somewhat aggressive before the flop and on the flop, and for the longest time when I would get raised, I would assume they were playing back at me, but really, they're not. If somebody 3-bets me pre-flop or if somebody raises me on the flop, they've got a hand. So I finally, kind of got over that. It still gets me now and then, but they're not playing back at me. Now, the second last bullet there is actually a bit of a surprise. You would expect on such a nitty site that if they're willing to stack off, they've got a set, but you do frequently see all but even tags, or even some nits who are like 15-11 or 17-13, they will stack off with king-queen on a king-7-2 rainbow flop. So you can, if you hand read and pay attention to what their ranges must be, you can win some stacks with your aces over pairs or your ace-king on a king-high flop. Okay. And I mentioned the bottom one. Really, the only change as you go from 4 to 6 to 10 is they get nittier, and sometimes if I want to play 4, 5, 6 tables at once, there just aren't very many running, and I have to add on the 6 and the 10, or I'm sitting there playing 2 tables, and too boring for me. So anyway, moving on. I play Crushing the Micro Stakes poker, and I make a few adjustments based on juicy stakes. And I open very wide from every position, and I do that with a plan. I used to do it and then get stupid, and I started hemorrhaging money. But if I open, for example, Ace-5 offsuit from under the gun +1 at a full ring table, as long as I know I'm trying to scoop up the blinds or I'm trying to take it down on the flop with a C-bet, and I don't get stupid if I flop an ace. I don't even get stupid if I flop Ace-5 and I see a lot of action, really. As long as I stick to the plan, I'm just trying. I open this wide pre-flop because I'm trying to scoop up a lot of blinds and I'm trying to take down a lot of pots with half pot c-bets, and it really works. I win a lot of small pots that way. And the second bullet, that's not really a change from Crushing the Micro Stakes, opening even wider than normal from the cutoff and button. If the blinds have a very high fold to steal, just open it up down there. From the cutoff and the button, if there's one pre-flop raiser behind me and he has a high fold to 3-bet, I will often try to 3-bet light, but just from the cutoff and button. I'll talk about that in a second. Or even a squeeze opportunity. It's just amazing how often they fold to 3-bets and squeezes, so there's opportunities here. Now, the reason I say my range is I'm not a particularly disciplined player. If I don't sit down with a plan, if I don't sit down and say, okay, play with this set of hands, don't play with this set of hands, I will end up just looking for any excuse to play any other hand. And so that's one reason, is just to give myself a guideline, give myself a rule. The other reason I picked this range is, with the exception of ace-rag offsuit, these all at least have a chance to flop something on the off chance your 3-bet actually gets called. If my 3-bet gets 4-bet, then basically anything but aces and kings I'm pitching to the 4-bet. And I would only include like queens or ace-king if their 3-bet percentage was very high. So, but if they call my 3-bet, then at least I have a chance of flopping a flush draw, a straight draw, a set, top pair, or something like that. So, and again, this third bullet, this is all about just trying to win more small pots in a game where there aren't a lot of big pots to win. And then the fourth one, again, and the reason I do this from the cutoff and the button is just I'm trying to take baby steps. If you do this just in late position, then if you do see a flop, you're playing post flop in position, which, as everyone knows, is just 100 times easier than trying to play out of position. So, I mean, as I get more comfortable playing post flop, I'll probably open that up. But for now, I'm just trying to ground myself, take it a little at a time. So, anyway, so from the cutoff and the button, if I have one raiser behind me who is a loose raiser, and he has a low fold to 3-bet, which means he flats a lot of 3-bets, doesn't like to fold to him. If I have a hand that I think is ahead or way ahead of his range, I will probably 3-bet that, hoping A, to get him, because I think I'm ahead of him and I want him to put more money in the pot with a worse hand than mine. B, I'm in position. C, I get the initiative after the flop, and we all know how big position and initiative are. So these are just opportunities I look for, again, to win more small pots. Now the point of all this, the adding the new tricks one at a time, I have tried over the past 2.5 years to try to learn the whole game at once. It just doesn't work. I just can't keep all that in my head. So I'm trying to learn, I'm trying to take a building block approach. You know, I start with crushing the micro stakes and just play exactly how Black Rain says to play, and then I add opening this range until I get comfortable with that. I add stealing more until I get comfortable with that. I'm still trying to get comfortable with 3-betting light pre-flop, still trying to really get a feel for when it works and when it doesn't. And until then, I just don't want to try to add new tricks. Like, I'm sure on this site there are a lot of villains with a high flop c-bet and a low turn c-bet, so you could exploit that by floating a lot of flops in position and taking it down on the turn. You know, there are a lot of villains that fold to a lot of flop raises, and I'm sure you could take that, you know, exploit that with c-bets, but I don't want to, I'm not ready for that yet. I'm going to wait until I'm comfortable with light 3-betting, and then I'm going to work on improving my post-flop skills. I do not slow play. That's a separate video. I think I've said a little too much, so I'm going to go ahead and cut this video off here, and the next video will actually have some hands.